This is my book review of Living with a Seal. This is by Jesse Itzler. It's pretty much talking about how he called up David Goggins and asked him if he would live with him for a month. And so a little bit about Jesse Itzler. Jesse is a very successful businessman. He owns a private jet chartering business. And he definitely has a strong work ethic, but he definitely does have, in a sense, a very sheltered life, at least the one he currently lives, because of his success. He talks a lot about flying private just for like very short trips. And that could be an explanation of maybe, him being in that business, but also just the fact that they're home, they live in a very nice place, they have multiple homes, and all of their homes are very nicely furnished. And so in a sense, they're living a very sheltered life, right? And the main part of this book is showing this dichotomy, this sharp contrast with him and, David Goggins, because David Goggins is, somebody who came from what you could call the dregs or the bottoms of society and pushed his way through sheer effort all the way to where he is now. And it's really interesting because you see that this is actually a point when David Goggins, I think, was the most extreme. I think he's actually tapered down a little bit now because of the fact that he recognizes that some of the stuff he's done, he said this in like interviews and like things that wasn't really good for his body. So he has a better wellness approach of like including stretching. He's still very extreme in other ways, but at least in the sense that he tries to minimize now, the impact on his body. But this was before then. So the idea is that David Goggins can at any time decide what they should do, and Jesse pretty much has to do that. So a lot of this is just workout related. A lot of it is running, doing push-ups, doing sit-ups, doing pull-ups, and then even towards the end, it actually involves getting into a lake, and it's freezing cold. The lake is literally frozen over, like multiple layers deep, so frozen that people are like actually playing hockey on it. And they decide to burrow a hole just so they can get in. And another time is talking about where they go into a sauna room, they crank it up to 125 degrees and they do it. So like the point is, it's definitely quite risky, but I think that you need these kind of extremes because we see in how he talks about towards the end of the book, how this whole 31 day like month experience really changed him in the sense that like it made him realize how comfortable, how routine oriented he is, and how he wasn't really pushing his limits. Now, pushing his limits doesn't mean you need to go out and do dangerous things that could potentially damage your body, but it does mean you need to switch up the routine a little bit. I think a lot of times, David Goggins, being a Navy SEAL, trained from a lot of military perspectives, he kept telling them that like, oh, your routines are bad because then that means you're very predictable and things. And while like, you could argue it doesn't really matter too much for like a safety perspective because I mean, these people are living in like a gated community, it's like very safe in that sense. But in reality, right, like it is true that if you do the same thing all the time, you're going to get the same result all the time. And that can be good most of the time, but also it's good to like change it up because changing it up does shift your perspective because sometimes you get in a mental rut where you get so used to things and you don't see other perspectives and you only see your own, and that can be very narrowing, very limiting. And that's not good to have for, a lot of, for your life, right? For a lot of people live like this for 30, 40 years and they never change anything. And this is why sometimes vacations can be good to kind of, especially if you travel to another country, they can open your eyes to new experiences. But you don't have to take a vacation to actually open your eyes to new experiences. You can just push your limits and do, in a sense, these kind of random challenges. And it's interesting because that's actually what Jesse did. This is why he called David Goggins, because he was just like, why not? Let's see what happens. And it did actually, benefit him. So as always, there's a very, complex dynamic of balance in the sense that you need to do things with repetition and predictability to help yourself improve on those things. But at the same time, every once in a while, you do want to switch something up, push yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone so you can actually, be more successful because you're going to now have a varied experience. You're going to open your eyes a little bit, see new perspectives. And I think you can do a lot of this through meeting people, through talking to people, through going different places, through also reading a lot of different books. Because a lot of books are not going to be written the same. They're going to be written by different people talking about their different experiences. Right? For example, if we had a different person that wasn't Jesse and he went to go live with David Goggins, I'm sure the book would have been much different. And as a result of that. So I think this is just a testament to how we do need a little bit of intensity every once in a while in our lives. We don't need it all the time, but you have to be kind of vigilant and recognize when are you going into a direction that's like kind of a too much of a routine to the point where it's limiting you. Because at the end of this, Jesse's able to do 1,000 push-ups in a day. And in the beginning, he was not regularly doing push-ups. He's able to run much faster, right? So the physical aspects of improvement are very impressive. But you can only imagine, too, the mental aspects of improvement. And this is something Jesse comments on. He says after that, he really stopped procrastinating because he just thought of what would David Goggins do in that sense, because he lived with him for a month straight, and he saw how different David Goggins reacted to things, how different and how he didn't negotiate with himself. And so these kind of behaviors are really good things for us to take away from this and understand that we need that exposure to those kind of extremes, not so we can, go to those extremes constantly, but so that we can actually, move ourselves towards that direction. Like, for example, living with David Goggins for a month definitely did not turn Jesse into David Goggins, right? So he did not become the extreme, but it moved him more towards that side of being more disciplined, being more focused, being more intense with certain things. And as such, right, that made Jesse actually, become more successful in some ways, right? Or just improved his life. And also he had a better ability to appreciate the present moment and not be constantly worrying about things. So by exposing ourselves to these extremes and setting these kind of extremes in our daily lives, we can kind of expand and broaden our perspective and understanding of life and how we view things, and that can be very beneficial. I thought this was it was a pretty short, fun book. It wasn't a lot of like heavy reading or anything, but it was cool to see David Goggins in a different scenario because I've read both of his other books. I've also like listened to a lot of interviews with him. So you definitely get a lot of his like thinking, but seeing it from a different perspective of somebody living with him is very funny, as well as the family's reaction to David Goggins and the other people too in the community. There's this one scene where they're like running up a busy street that's really like rush hour traffic, everything. And there's not many there's a very homogeneous kind of people, a lot of just like white, rich people in that area. And so to see this huge African-American ripped guy running without a shirt on next to this guy, it was just a very, very different picture in their mind. And everybody was kind of shocked and very like amazed and stuff like that. And as such, right, it just shows that these extremes can really change what we think, can change how we view things, and I argue that that's actually a good change. If you have any other questions, put them in the comments below. Otherwise, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video.